Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. I'm Ryan Wormeli, joined today by Derek Brown and by Pat Fitzmaurice. Fellas, it is week one. This is our Friday show. We are running it back from last year. We did sort of a season-long Friday show preview of sorts with a couple of season-long key questions that we answered earlier this week. That dropped on Labor Day, so check it out if you have some season-long thoughts there. This will be more matchup specific, looking ahead at actual week one matchups. There's going to be a degree of season-long stuff that's kind of inherent to week one. We're still kind of learning what these teams are going to look like in real actual football games. But whatever they look like, we are certainly excited to watch. D-Bro, just what's your, I asked Fitz this on the Thursday show yesterday, what's your mindset going into week one? Are you like just excited? Are you nervous? Are you like staring down the barrel of this is going to be a long year of rankings in the primer? Or are you just like, football's back and that kind of makes everything else go away?
We know there's going to be a lot of work, a lot of long hours, a lot of late nights and early mornings. And dude, I'm so excited for all of it. I got the week one primer already out. It's live on the site. So right now, I can't tell you that when we get to week 5 or week 6 that I'm going to be this fresh and energized and happy. But right now, I'm excited, dude. I'm ready for it.
D-Bro, is there one storyline that you're like, as a fan, not even as like a content creator, but as a fan, I'm just most excited to see how this plays out this year?
I'm ready to see the over-under on Dennis Allen, how many games he gets before he gets kicked out of New Orleans.
Spoken like a true Saints fan.
Yep.
Fitz, are you excited to be running back the Friday show this year?
I am excited about it. I love this show. I love some of the things we hit on. It's got this sort of random element to it, but I think we cover a lot of fantasy relevant topics here. So hopefully this is useful to a lot of different people.
Fun conversational show that we're going to try and bring to you guys every single Friday. By the way, just to let everybody know, we are recording this on Thursday this week. Typically, we will record this on Friday mornings due to some scheduling stuff here for week one because Fitz, for some reason, has a fantasy draft scheduled after the first game of the season and couldn't be available on Friday. This is his annual, this is every year, but we are taping this on Thursday. So if anything wild happens on Thursday Night Football, Chiefs Ravens in the opener, and we don't address it, it's for that reason. We're not going to include that game in today's show because obviously by the time this is released, you guys will have seen that game. But if we don't address a major injury or if the Ravens pull off a big upset or whatever it is, that's because we're taping this a day early for this week only. Quick reminder for everyone that all of our rankings and tiers throughout the season can be found at fantasypros.com/rankings. And if you're juggling multiple fantasy football teams and feeling overwhelmed, Fantasy Pros will help you simplify things. With Fantasy Pros Multi-League Assistant, you can see the latest news, notes, and rankings for every single player across all your teams. It's all in one spot, making your path to victory clearer and easier. Dive in and let us help you dominate all your leagues with the Multi-League Assistant at fantasypros.com/myplaybook or on the Fantasy Football My Playbook app. Guys, we're also bringing back the Over-Under Challenge this season, and we're going to be joined by a special guest. So before we dive into our key questions for this week, let's check in with Colin Cowherd and his Over-Under picks in our weekly contest. Joined now by a man who needs no introduction. You know him from FS1. You know him as the founder of The Volume. It's Colin Cowherd. Colin, very excited to be working with The Volume again this year. It was great last year. It's been great so far this year. And it's awesome having you come on the Friday show every week here with Fantasy Pros. Thanks so much for making the time.
Ryan, I can't wait. It's a fascinating week one because I love a lot of these young quarterbacks, but I don't know if I love any of them in week one. So there's one of the things that's like Christmas presents. I feel like I'm opening Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels and Bo Nix. And the winner may end up being Michael Penix, who doesn't have to play for a year. Right. So with that good offensive line in Atlanta, he can watch with all those weapons and watch a pro do it. But I can't wait for week one.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, it feels to me the consensus online is there's like maybe more excitement for this season than any I can remember in a while. The Chiefs three-peat they're going for and all the established quarterbacks that can't get past Mahomes and all the young quarterbacks you just alluded to. Like, are you feeling the same? Maybe it's ineffable, but for whatever reason, I am more excited for this season than I feel like I've been in the last couple of years. Are you feeling the same way?
Yeah, and I think it's a season where we're like, oh my God, could Detroit make a Super Bowl?
Yeah.
Could Houston make a Super Bowl? Could Washington be a playoff team? There's been a hierarchy in this league, it feels like, for a long time. Could the Chargers, with Jim Harbaugh and Herbert now, be a consistent 12-win team? A lot of these teams with bad luck and bad mojo and bad owners, they feel like it feels like a lot of these have-nots maybe entering a have era. And I think, it's you see this in the NBA where it's all of a sudden the anonymous Denver Nuggets. You're like, oh, they have the world's best player. And Milwaukee's got Giannis. And I think that's exciting that you just don't have the same dominant coastal teams. I think there's a lot of interest in the Lions this year. I'm not so sure it's not the best roster in the league.
Yeah, and what's funny too is like some of those, have-nots entering the haves level. The haves aren't going anywhere because in the last few years it's been, Bills, Ravens, Chiefs. Those quarterbacks are all still in their 20s. So it's just going to be a really exciting season, and I can't wait. We're recording this just a couple hours before opening kickoff, and I am super pumped for it. Just to let everybody know, Colin will be joining us every week this season to pick some player over-unders for the weekend's slate of games. And you, the listeners, can play along too. Head to fantasypros.com/challenge to go against Colin and try to win some cool prizes. We've got about a half dozen names we're going to get through today, just talking about some over-unders and really whether you like them or not here in week one. Let's start with the quarterbacks. We'll start with Geno Smith, somebody I've been very excited about from a fantasy perspective. New coaching staff there. I think they're going to run more plays. Obviously, he's got a lot of weapons there. Going up against the Broncos, do you like Geno Smith to have a good week one?
I do, for a couple of reasons. It'll be a field position game. I don't think it's a wild shootout. Denver's got one real issue, and I think Denver's better than people think, but they don't have much of a consistent pass rush. They also have a rookie quarterback. They're going to probably come in with a fairly conservative game plan, try to win field position. I think Seattle has underrated offensive weapons. I like Pete Carroll. I thought the last 2 years they underachieved, and that's why they moved on. I think Bo Nix, as a rookie road quarterback against an excellent defensive coach, will make some mistakes. Geno will win the field position day. Geno now has been in Seattle for a couple of years. He's been paid. He feels good about it. I think Seattle's got 2 receivers, 2 backs, and 2 tackles I like. I think they win. I think they win by a touchdown. And Geno's taken a lot of snaps in this league. I like Bo Nix, but Geno's been around the block. It's a very redemptive story, and I think he's got a shot here.
The other quarterback we have in this week's challenge, Caleb Williams, and we were talking a little before we started recording, Colin, just how kind of interested you are in this game. A little bit on the other side with Levis, but a couple of really interesting young quarterbacks in this one. With Caleb specifically, are you expecting a big week one or maybe a welcome to the NFL moment in his first real action?
I think both. I think he is such an improvisational player and they have upgraded offensive weapons, but doesn't it feel like, Ryan, it's a little too hot? The hard knocks, the Tennessee has been sitting watching Chicago get love for 6 months. They are steaming. I mean, they are just watching everybody just praise the Bears. I mean, from a betting angle, it's one of my first bets of the week is take the Titans. Will Levis has a new coach, the Callahans, father, son. They've got some upgrades at weapons. This is a pretty decent defensive personnel. I think Caleb will have moments, but it just feels like we're rooting for Chicago, and the Titans can sense we're rooting for Chicago, and somebody's playing spoiler this weekend. Now, I think Caleb can outplay Will Levis, but I like the Titans in this spot. It feels like Chicago's going to be fine this year, but I don't know. I've never seen Caleb take a pro snap. At least I've seen Will in the NFL. I think this will be disappointing to Bear fans.
Yeah, I think he will learn quickly. It's not the Pac-12. I think he'll learn quickly. It's not preseason football. And I think you're spot on with the Titans. I mean, I remember when everybody was kind of doing their rankings of all the coaching hires this offseason, Callahan was kind of the forgotten man, and it feels like they're almost kind of the forgotten team in this division in the AFC. So I think you're right that they're going to come out, really wanting to make a statement here against kind of this golden child, new shiny toy in the NFL. Let's look at some running backs here. Bijan Robinson, somebody I was very excited about last year, and it felt like a little bit of a disappointment in terms of the fantasy perspective, playing in Arthur Smith's offense, everything like that. Still a really good season and a really talented running back. He's going up against Arthur Smith and the Steelers in the first week this season. Do you like Bijan to have a big game?
Well, a big game relative to what he did last year. I didn't understand how they used him last year. I didn't get it. I loved him. In fact, when he came out, an NFL executive told me, he said he's the closest thing to LaDainian Tomlinson. He had no flaws. He doesn't fumble, locker room, toughness, catches, blocks. He's a great young back. they didn't use him. It was almost like he got into the doghouse with Arthur Smith. And this is a very good offensive line with some weapons on the perimeter. So I think relative to last year, I think he will be formidable. But Mike Tomlin as an underdog coach is really good. The Steelers tend to play up to their competition. You know what I mean? Like when they're told they're in trouble, they tend to play with their hair on fire. I do worry about Pittsburgh, though. Russell Wilson's calf's an issue. I think Atlanta's my sneaky good team in the NFL this year. I think they could win 12 games in this division. Yes, I like Bijan. Again, comparing it to last year, yeah, I think he'll get far more touches and far more usage. I wouldn't bet the farm week 1 against Pittsburgh, but I do think he'll be productive here.
Another running back we wanted to hit on, James Cook, going up against the Cardinals. He got great usage in Joe Brady's offense in the second half last year. We'll see if that continues into this season and starting off in week 1, like I said, against Arizona. Is he somebody you think could come out hot or maybe a slower start?
Well, they lose Stephon Diggs. They have an excellent rookie receiver from Florida State, but he's a rookie receiver. So they're very tight end, Josh Allen and James Cook centric to me. I think Cook's an excellent player. You know, the Bills are funny. They have a very good left tackle. Then it's been a lot of musical chairs in the offensive line. And because older offensive linemen don't play in the preseason much anymore, they just don't. It usually takes September to get your units cohesive. I worry a little bit about the Jets O-line with Aaron. I worry here about Buffalo's O-line. There's some movement. I think James Cook is a really good player. And because Josh Allen and Stephon and McDermott and the defense get so much attention, and the Kincaid, the young rookie tight end people fell in love with, nobody paid much attention. I think he's the best running back that McDermott has had and Josh Allen has had. So I like him a lot here.
We've got 3 wide receivers we'll wrap up with, starting with Justin Jefferson, obviously, you know, the first or second best wide receiver in the NFL, depending who you ask. He's really, really good. Lost J.J. McCarthy for the season. Maybe not the worst thing in terms of week 1 numbers. He has, it's Sam Darnold, but somebody who's actually played an NFL game before, thrown a lot more passes than McCarthy has. Going up against the Giants, do you like Jefferson in week 1?
I'm a little hesitant. First of all, they'll roll coverage over. Sam Darnold on the road without a great protection here. The Giants' defensive front is the strength of the team. So now you're telling me Sam Darnold under duress. That doesn't feel Sam Darnold without a lot of time to throw. I think Minnesota's going to run the ball or try to. I think they'll roll coverage over. My hunch is it won't be a great afternoon for Justin Jefferson.
Jaylen Waddle, the next wide receiver in this week's challenge, going up against Jacksonville. You know, Waddle is somebody that our podcast has been really high on for fantasy this season. We think he's pretty underrated because he's playing second fiddle to Tyreek Hill. We still think there's a pretty high floor with him in terms of fantasy and also a high ceiling. Just a player that we really like. Do you think he starts off hot in this battle of Florida teams?
Yeah, I think this is the wildest game of the season. Remember last year, the Chargers-Miami first week? It was just a shootout. Chargers had them pinned.
Yes.
I think this is the most entertaining game of the weekend. Now, there's a weather concern like there often is in September in Florida. But listen, when it comes to Miami, I think you're just talking about one of the really smart coaches. And I may not love Tua, but I've said this before. I love him at home. I love him in warm weather. I don't love him in Baltimore, Kansas City, Cleveland, Cincinnati in January when it's windy and it's raining sideways. He's not built for that. But home with this coach, an off season to prepare, I think Miami's dropping 35 points. I think it's going to be one of the more entertaining games because I like Jacksonville a lot too this year. They could have won that division if Trevor Lawrence didn't get hurt. So I think you're going to get a shootout. I think Tua and the Dolphins, this is a 35-30 game. They're going to be passing on the final series. I like Waddle a lot here.
I totally agree. This is a game that we are going to see a lot on Red Zone on Sunday. It's going to be a very fun one. Last wide receiver here, Davante Adams, obviously very, very good player for a long time. Quarterback questions going up against the Chargers. Not sure what the defense is going to look like. Obviously, new coaching staff there in LA. What do you expect out of Davante here in week 1?
I think it's a very physical, low-scoring game. I love Davante Adams. And I don't think the Chargers are gifted. I think the Chargers are a good team. I don't love them on the perimeter offense or defense. I think they'll get a corner next year early and a receiver early. I think between the tackles in. I think on both sides of the ball, they're good. I think it's low scoring. I think Davante will be the best receiver on the field, probably easily. But this feels 23-20 to me. This feels like if you can take him away, it's Brock Bowers. You're looking at a rookie tight end. I think this is a low-scoring alley fist fight, and I don't think anybody's going to pop.
Don't forget to check out fantasypros.com/challenge to go up against Colin, myself, and everyone else in our over-under challenge all season long. Colin, thanks again for joining, and enjoy kickoff tonight.
Thanks, Ryan.
All right, guys. Thank you again to Colin Cowherd for joining us. He'll be back every single week this season to share his over/under picks. So be sure to check out the challenge on Fantasy Pros website, and we'll see if you guys can do better than Colin, can do better than us. We'll kind of share some of our favorite over/unders as well throughout the year. Be sure to check out that challenge, and we appreciate Colin making the time for us. Let's dive in. We do have a Friday game, so there is a game tonight, fellas. As of when this is getting released, it is Packers versus Eagles, a very fun one. Hopefully last night was fun as well, saying from the perspective of a Ravens fan. But I'm expecting Packers-Eagles to be a really exciting game. Again, they take place in Brazil tonight. My key question here, will Jordan Love start the season just as hot as he ended last year? And if he does, will we see a number one in the Green Bay wide receiver room emerge right off the bat here in week one? Fitz, you are the Packers fan. What do you think here?
I think he will pick up where he left off. I don't think we're going to see a clear number one receiver emerge right away. I mean, maybe we'll know that eventually, and I would put my money on Christian Watson, but I do think it's going to be sort of a group contribution, an ensemble cast, if you will. But the Eagles gave up the fifth most passing yards last season and the second most touchdown passes, 35 of them. The Eagles pass defense ranked 29th in DVOA. And Howie Roseman did try to patch some of the holes. He drafted Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, a pair of cornerbacks, first and second round. But are we expecting a pair of rookie cornerbacks to completely fix this pass defense right away? I think that might be a little naive. So this is a good matchup for Love. And with all those good young receivers and tight ends, he can sort of pick which Eagles defenders he wants to pick on in this one. And feel confident that his receiver is going to make the play no matter who it is. So I think he's going to have a good game to open, and I do expect points in this game.
I definitely am expecting points as well. Debra, what do you think about Love? I mean, obviously a slower start last year, but that was also still kind of being newer to the role of starting quarterback and the offense and everything. So was last season like, do you kind of view him as almost like maybe a second half type player, or do you think he just like kind of figured it out and you expect him to pick up exactly where he left off to start the year?
I think he's going to pick up right where he left off. I mean, you're talking about, and we always kind of mention this, like quarterbacks, whether they're changing offensive coordinators, learning new playbooks, getting used to and building rapport with new players, wide receivers and stuff. Love has none of that to overcome this year. He gets to really dive deep and get super. I mean, like, as comfortable as he looked in the offense last year down the stretch, what can we see if he takes that comfort to a second level? And can he be even better this year? Like, I won't rule it out, like, if he's in the MVP talk this year. So I think he picks up right where he left off last year. Fitz laid it out perfectly. This is a pass funnel defense. And I will make the bet that Christian Watson is going to step up as the wide receiver one, and it starts now. And you just look at the coverage matchup. I mean, it screams that. I mean, this is a team that's going to run a lot of cover 3, a lot of cover 6. Last year, Watson had 2.0 yards per route run against those coverage types and had 5 end zone targets in the short sample. We saw him relatively healthy. I think Watson goes out and has a monster game versus Fitz laid it out. Kind of an unproven secondary, and even if you want to tout Darius Slay, at this point in his career, he can be beat by speed, and we know that it's exactly what Watson has, speed for days.
I don't know if Watson is the chalk pick for week one. He's definitely the consensus on this podcast. If you had to go a different direction at wide receiver as the guy you think maybe is, at least for this week, the best Packers receiver of those other 3 names, where would you go, Debra?
I probably would go to, I mean, obviously I think it's between Jayden Reed and Romeo Doubs. I'm probably going with Jayden Reed just because of the multiverse usage that we saw last year. I mean, he was Dairy Belt Deebo Samuel. So if he takes an in around to the house, plus, I mean, we saw Philly, and I know we talk about the upgrades like in their secondary, both with the draft picks of the guys that they had, plus bringing over Isaiah Rodgers, bringing back, God, I'm blanking on it, CJ Gardner-Johnson. He's probably going to cover the slot, but I think if I was going to pick one guy, it's probably Jaden Reed.
What do you think, Fitz? Also Reed for you?
Yeah, I think Reed too. Dobbs has some sort of hand issue. I think he's expected to play, but maybe that slows him down a little bit. And I thought I saw that Tucker Kraft maybe sustained some sort of injury and showed up on the injury report late, in which case maybe the Packers go with fewer 2 tight end sets, which means more 3 wide, more Jaden Reed on the field.
By the way, Fitz, do you like having your team play one of these like first primetime games of the season, or would you prefer they were just on Sunday? Because again, as a Ravens fan, like I would kind of prefer they were just playing on Sunday.
I think I would prefer that too. The standalone thing makes me extra nervous.
I do like the Friday games.
I love the island games.
I do like having this Friday game. I wouldn't want it every week, but I think for week 1, it's kind of nice to be like, we have the big opener on Thursday and then we don't have to wait 2 more days to get to Sunday. Like I kind of like having this Friday game. So I wonder if they'll continue it every year. I kind of hope they do. Let's go to that Sunday early slate here. Game number 2 of the games we're talking about today. Steelers at Falcons. Is this an Arthur Smith revenge game, or will it play out that way? What will the Steelers offense look like with both a new offensive coordinator and a new quarterback, Debro?
I think the Steelers are going to be exactly what they were last year, and that's going to lean in what Arthur Smith wants to do. And they're going to run the ball. And it doesn't matter who is under quarterback. It doesn't matter. Arthur Smith wants to do that. And that's what we saw from the Steelers last year. Like what they did, they led the NFL in neutral rushing rate. And then you look at what Arthur Smith did with the Atlanta Falcons last year. Second highest neutral rushing rate in the NFL. I think it's going to be turnkey. It's going to be immediately from the word go. They're just going to run the ball the entire time. So I think it's exactly what Arthur Smith wants to do. Mike Tomlin showed his hand last year. That's what he wants to do. And look, we're going to get some play action. We're going to get deep shots, regardless if it's Fields, if it's Russell Wilson and stuff. So, we're going to get some George Pickens moments. I just don't know how often they're going to be this year.
What do you think, Fitz?
Well, it's Arthur Smith, so I'm sure we'll get an inconsistent workload split between Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren. I'm sure we'll get baffling tight end usage, fewer George Pickens targets than we think he should have, more targets and rushes than we'd like to see for Cordero Patterson and maybe Van Jefferson and Calvin Austin too. In a word, it's going to be annoying, like it always is with an Arthur Smith offense. So like the tight end thing in the preseason, like I wanted to get excited about Pat Freiermuth, and then in the preseason, in one tight end sets they would have Freiermuth on the field. And then when they went to 2 tight ends, he would come out and they would put in Darnell Washington and, favorites, Arthur Smith, Pat Michael Pruitt. So like even that, like we can't even have Pat Freiermuth in this offense. So it's just going to be annoying all year.
With Arthur Smith, we're not allowed to have nice things, Fitzy. Haven't you learned that by now? We're going to see more Darnell Washington and more Cordero Patterson than anybody wants to see this year.
I was going to say maybe the revenge game narrative goes the other direction, and it's Bijan and Kyle Pitts and Drake London who are getting revenge and showing Arthur Smith what he missed out on last year.
I hope so. I hope all 3 of them just go off and the Falcons bury the Steelers in this game, and you see a pissed off Arthur Smith on the sidelines like making all the faces, and I could just see the camera just going like zooming in to that just like that bitter beer face he's gonna have all game. I can't wait.
NFL Week 1 is here, and a new season means new ways to get in on the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Fans have spoken. We want to bet on touchdowns. DraftKings heard us and is delivering. DraftKings Sportsbook is the #1 place to bet on touchdowns. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something simple like picking a player to score a touchdown. Every matchup is great when the NFL is back in our lives, but I'm particularly intrigued by the Cardinals in Buffalo getting 6.5 points. I think the Arizona offense is taking a big step forward this season, so that matchup total on DraftKings of 48 is quite interesting to me. I think there will be touchdowns galore in that one, but the question is, are you planning to do a touchdown dance of your own? New DraftKings customers bet $5 to get $250 in bonus bets instantly, plus 1 month of NFL premium on us. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code FantasyPros. That's code FantasyPros for new customers to get $250 in bonus bets when you bet just $5 and get 1 month of NFL Plus Premium on us. Offer ends September 19th. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Speaking of Cardinals at Bills, let's go to that for our next game. I've been really high on the Cardinals offense all draft season. I know, Debro, you have been too. Will that pay off right away in week one, or will it take, a couple of weeks to see how they fully integrate Marvin Harrison Jr. and Kyler Murray, another year removed for the injury? Or will we see it right away, Debro?
I think we'll see it right away. And there's one player that I specifically want to highlight, and it's not the guy that most of us have been talking about for them the entirety of the offseason. I think Arizona, the conversation has started with either Trey McBride or Marvin Harrison Jr. or Kyler Murray. The guy that I want to push to the forefront of this conversation, and I think we're going to see a big game from in this offense, is James Conner. And I think people just do not understand that the Buffalo Bills, and I wrote this up in the primer, that they have not had a good run defense. And this is not just like last year, but it's multiple seasons. So Conner is a fantastic matchup, man. The Buffalo Bills gave up the 7th highest explosive run rate and the 4th highest yards after contact per attempt last year. So I think Conner is, well, in a lot of different instances, you look at the big pieces of this offense, he was the cheapest one in drafts. And I think he walks away with, if not probably the best game out of all of the weapons that we could discuss here.
Yeah, I think as long as Connor's healthy, he will beat the bell cow. I really liked Trey Benson. Mm-hmm. And the coaching staff has said as much, right? I'm not just projecting that. This is what they've told us. I loved Trey Benson early in the offseason, but yeah, the more I've considered it, the more I've seen the way they've talked and what we've seen out of Benson in the preseason, I just think this is Connor's backfield and his, grip on it to lose, barring injury. So, I'm totally with you, Debra. I think that's a great call because I think everybody will be looking to McBride and first game from Harrison and Kyler, all the way back from injury. But I think Connor's maybe going a little undervalued, even just right away, not just in drafts, but in week one. Fitz, what do you think for this week?
I don't know how well it works in week one. I mean, maybe it all clicks in right away. Maybe it doesn't. But I do think the bullishness that you've had on the Cardinals offense, Worm, is not, I don't know. I don't think you're wrong to feel that way. In Kyler's 8 starts last year, the Cardinals averaged 22.4 points a game. And if that had been their number over a full season, that would have put them 13th in the league, right behind the Green Bay Packers and right ahead of the Houston Texans. That's some pretty good company. And now they have added the prodigy, Marvin Harrison Jr. So I'm really excited to watch him play. Really excited to see what this offense is going to look like.
I don't if I'm making my NFL playoff predictions, I'm not putting the Cardinals in, but they're one of my favorite longer shot bets of playoffs, a team that could be very surprising to everybody this year. Again, I'm not picking them. There's other teams in the NFC I think will be better, but as a surprise team, and if it wasn't, they wouldn't be a surprise team if it wouldn't have been, a team that I would predict, but I could see them being a surprise this year. I'm really high on this team. Let's go to Titans at Bears. How will Caleb Williams look in his first true NFL action, Fitz?
Probably good and bad. Caleb's really talented, and he is probably going to be a top 10 NFL and fantasy quarterback in the not too distant future. I love that Ryan Poles has surrounded him with abundant pass catching talent. But Caleb is not going to be playing the Arizona State Sun Devils in his NFL debut. He's going to be playing the Tennessee Titans. And I know it's not one of the premier defenses in the league, but it's going to be a big adjustment for him. And I'm sure it's going to lead to some plays that leave us just scratching our heads what the heck was that? So we're going to see some of that, but we're also going to see Caleb make some exciting plays, because the one thing he does exceptionally well is make something out of nothing when the play breaks down. And we're going to see him do that, I'm sure, quite a bit as a rookie.
Debra, what are you expecting from Caleb right off the bat?
I think Fitz hit the nail on the head. I think really, really high-end moments, and then a lot of moments where he's going to look like exactly what he is, a rookie. And I think the Caleb Williams coming out the gate and what he looks like in this game, I think is also more of a reflection of what did the Tennessee Titans get out of their defense this year, because they overhauled the back end of that secondary. And the matchup on paper, just so everybody's aware, looks really, really good. If you look at last year's numbers and say, well, why are we not ranking Caleb Williams higher? Why are we not talking about how he's just going to absolutely crush this secondary this week? I mean, yeah, sure. You look on paper, this is a secondary that gave it the 9th highest yards per attempt and CPOE last year, but They added Quandre Diggs. They added Chidobe Awuzie. They added L'Jarius Sneed. And how many problems can this defense create for Caleb Williams, both disguising coverages? If L'Jarius Sneed does shadow DJ Moore, which, again, we don't know. We haven't seen this defense in effect. It could happen. And if Caleb is not able to see, okay, where's my first read? I got to get to my second, my third read. Now the pocket's breaking down, because the other thing we don't talk about enough too with the Chicago Bears offense, the offensive line is okay. We're hoping it's league average. It's not amazing by any stretch of the imagination. So if Tennessee can confuse Caleb a little bit with coverages and things like that, take away the top weapon, we could see him look more like a rookie and the plays break down. And if he's not able to make all that magic happening when he's running in circles in week one, which he can, then we could see him look like more of a rookie. And I'm very curious what that, when we come out of week one, what the narrative around Caleb is. Is everybody saying, oh my God, raw offensive rookie of the year, go make your bets? Or they're saying, okay, like let's preach a little bit of patience here for the talented rookie quarterback.
I wanted to include a second question for this matchup because I'm just as curious as I am to see how Caleb Williams looks in his first NFL action. I'm curious to see what Will Levis looks like in this new look offense. They added Brian Callahan, they added Bill Callahan. There were offseason additions at wide receiver and running back and also on the line. You know, Levis isn't somebody I was very high on a year ago, but the situation is much improved in my opinion, and I wouldn't be surprised if he really outperformed my expectations this season. I'm curious what you guys think and how he's going to look right off the bat against what should be a pretty good Bears defense here in week one, D-Bro.
I don't see Will Levis coming out and just lighting it up. I think the Bears defense should get respect after what they showed down the back half of last season. Like after week 11, they give the 11th lowest yards per attempt, third lowest passer rating to opposing passers. And this, I really think you're going to see a Tennessee offense that comes out, and I'm not going to say conservative, but we saw stuff on the newswire yesterday where they're like a lot of projections for this offense this coming season. We've all talked about, okay, is Callahan just going to air it out? Is he going to let Will Levis chuck? Because now they got Calvin Ridley. DeAndre Hopkins is expected to play in this game. The weapons are around him. But yesterday, looking at the news and stuff, there were rumblings about them talking about protecting Will Levis, being a run-heavy offense. And this run defense for Chicago last year was pretty dang close to elite. So you're looking at a Tennessee offense, if they just try to run the ball, and protect Levis in this game against a talented secondary that was a top 12 secondary going down the back half of last year, you could see more of a muted game for Will Levis, if not a little bit concerning if they take away that run game, or the run game's inefficient, and then it gets put on his shoulders later in the game. We've seen Will Levis, while he's shown some high-end moments, we've also seen a lot of bad last year from Will Levis. Inaccurate throws. What's he going to do in the pocket? Again, another team that rebuilt their offensive line. And how does that look in week one? Does it hold up, or does it look extremely porous and he's under duress the entire time? So I'm going to say a pump the brakes on Will Levis, and we probably see a low-end QB2 performance out of him.
Fitz, what do you expect out of Will Levis here in week one?
That is a good question. And it's funny, we all work in the, we're all inside the fantasy football cocoon. We do this for a living. And, not only do we do this work full time, but like we also consume a lot of content from other fantasy people and just football media in general. And like I've heard surprisingly little talk about Will Levis in the offseason. And I think it's just because everyone is sort of throwing up their hands and not quite knowing what to make of him. But he is sort of a pivotal figure this year because so many people in that Tennessee offense are going to either sink or swim, I think, based on how Levis does. And, what we saw last year was maybe kind of typical. He comes in and throws 4 touchdown passes in his very first game, and then he makes 8 more starts and throws 4 touchdown passes over those 8 starts. Mm-hmm. So like it could be a bumpy ride. Like we know this dude has a lot of arm talent and some decent mobility, but can he harness the arm talent, and can he like think his way through games like a true NFL quarterback? So I have no idea how effectively he can do that. And I've admittedly been kind of shying away from Titans receivers and pass catchers, especially. I've dabbled a little in that backfield, but I I don't know what to make of Levis, and I tend to be a little more pessimistic than optimistic.
Let's go to Patriots at Bengals. My key question here, what will the Bengals offense look like if Jamar Chase is limited or doesn't end up playing? It seems like he might play and be limited from the last I had seen. Correct me if I'm wrong, guys. But if he's limited, what will this offense look like for the Bengals? And along those lines, how healthy do we trust Joe Burrow to even be, given that he was very rarely throwing even 3 days in a row? Again, kind of coming back from this really, very alarming wrist injury. They're not talking as if he's going to be, have a major problem, but I just get nervous when a guy's not throwing as much and had this unique injury. So between Jamar possibly being limited and Burrow possibly being limited to whatever degree that plays out, Fitz, what do you expect this offense to look like for Cincinnati?
Oh, not a Chase Brown question, Worm. We barely talked about him this offseason. I was really hoping we'd get to discuss him. No, so it's probably going to be an enhanced role for T. Higgins. I don't know if Chase is going to play a full complement of snaps for the Bengals, but reason to believe even if he does, the T. Higgins is going to be prominently involved. Maybe we get some Andre Yosevich. Maybe we get some Mike Gesicki. Maybe it is an RB-centric approach with Zach Moss and our guy Chase Brown. As for Burrow, he says he's healthy and that he's not too worried about his wrist injury, although that wording from him kind of makes me wonder. I guess we have to believe him, although I've kind of shied away from him this summer and draft season. The knee, the calf, the wrist, I do think we have to consider Burrow to be a player with at least a slightly elevated injury risk.
By the way, Fitz, this was a Chase Brown question. I was saying, hey, look, all these other players are limited. What's this offense going to look like? You could have said it was going to look like a whole lot of Chase Brown, and you chose not to. So really, you're not the Chase Brown fan I thought you were.
I've seen.
D-Row, what do you expect out of this offense?
I think they're going to be fine, man. I'm not worried about Burrow, to be honest. I think the wrist injury is concerning. I think you can also build a pretty easy case to say that even with the wrist injury, this is maybe the healthiest Burrow has been walking into week one, considering coming off a torn ACL, ruptured appendix, all the things he's dealt with, the calf injury last year. So if the wrist is even 80, 90% and the rest of his body is okay, I still think that's still a case that he's the healthiest he's been walking into week one outside of his rookie year. So I'm not worried about Burrow. As far as Chase, if he is limited, the way they limit him is pretty dang easy. You just put him in there whenever it's on passing downs. He plays a 50, 60% snap rate and he's only out there when they're running routes. We've seen teams do that before. Tennessee did that way back yesteryear with A.J. Brown, where he was banged up in multiple spots. And it's okay, well, you're only going to play 50, 60% of the snaps. We're going to put you out there on passing downs. And you have a 70, 80% route clip, but you're only going to play part of the game. And that's honestly, if that's how they're going to limit it, that's the way that I see it going for Chase. And so I think you fire up Chase. If he's playing, you fire him up like you normally would. He's a wide receiver 1. Because when he's on the field, I think in this matchup specifically, a lot of man coverage, a lot of single high. I think Chase can be Chase like he usually is, considering the secondary in the matchup. If he was limited any more than what I'm discussing, I'm with Fitz. I think it'd be a very heavy T. Higgins game, considering what he did last year. And again, putting the numbers to it, New England, 59% of their defensive snaps last year, which I think crosses over into this year, considering the new defensive coordinator who's been on that staff forever. 59% of their snaps were single high. You look at Higgins, he was inside the top 32 receivers in both target per route run rate and first downs per route run against that coverage type. So if it's not Chase, should be a lot of T.
Guys, low testosterone affects about 30% of adult men in America. Are you feeling the drag of fatigue, noticing a dip in muscle mass, or sensing a slump in libido? If so, it's time to get your testosterone levels tested. If you have low T, Kysotrex is an FDA-approved pill that's changing the game in testosterone replacement therapy. In fact, Kysotrex restored testosterone levels in nearly 9 out of 10 clinical study participants, and its unique formulation bypasses the liver to avoid liver damage. It's time to break free from injections, pellets, and gels. Choose Kysotrex and take a step toward being the hero of your life again. To learn more, visit Kysotrex.com. That's KYZATREX.com. By prescription only, Kaisertrex is a controlled substance and can be a target of abuse. Kaisertrex is not for use in pregnant women or men with prostate or breast cancer. Safety and efficacy in those younger than 18 is not known. Tell your doctor about all medical conditions and medications. Serious side effects could include increased blood pressure, worsening prostate symptoms, increased risk of prostate cancer, blood clots in the legs or lungs, decreased sperm count, liver problems, enlarged or painful breasts, and breathing problems while you sleep. Common side effects include swelling of the ankles, feet, or body, increased red blood cell count, an increase in prostate-specific antigen or PSA levels. PSA is a test used to detect prostate cancer. Report these symptoms to your doctor. Call your doctor to learn more about Kaisertrex. For questions or more information, visit www.kaisertrex.com or call 1-833-949-5040. All right, guys, let's get into Texans at Colts. Should be a really fun game here in the AFC South. Should be a fun season for the AFC South, which is not something I've said many years previously. Which year two quarterback are you most intrigued to see early in the season? Not which do you believe in most, which are you most intrigued to see this season? CJ Stroud leveling up with more weapons in Houston, or Anthony Richardson actually healthy, excuse me, and of course paired with a healthy Jonathan Taylor? Fitz.
This is one of the games on the Sunday slate I'm most excited about. This is going to be a really fun one, and I think I am more eager to see Anthony Richardson and what that offense looks like. There were only 2 games last season that Richardson started and finished, and he scored 21.9 and 29.6 fantasy points in those 2 games. Good for weekly finishes of QB4 and QB2. I've mentioned the stat a few times during the offseason that Josh Allen was the leading fantasy scorer at quarterback last season, and Anthony Richardson averaged 19.4% more fantasy points per snap than Josh Allen did. So this dude can light it up from a fantasy perspective, and we know a lot of that is running, but I don't think he's a total dud as a passer either, and I really do, though, want to see how this running game works with Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor, because I think it could be pretty spectacular. I want to see how heavily involved Michael Pittman is. I want to see if Adonai Mitchell can get involved in the passing game early on. I'm pretty anxious to see the Indianapolis offense.
Debra, what do you think?
I want to see good players play good, man. And this is not any shade at Anthony Richardson, but I'm so excited. So excited to see CJ Stroud in this revamped offense. All these weapons around him. What he did last year as a rookie coming in and behind an offensive line that we entered the season, we're like, I don't know how good this offensive line is going to be. We don't know how good any of these pass catchers are going to be. And you want to see teams build around these rookie quarterback contracts, and Houston goes all in and they say, okay, here's Stephon Diggs, here's Joe Mixon. The offensive line gelled perfectly last year and bringing back all these guys. So more cohesion. I want to see CJ Stroud light it up. I want to see him inject himself into the MVP conversation. I want to see CJ Stroud on the national stage and people give him respect, because I'm still old enough to remember when there was so much hate walking into the NFL draft for CJ Stroud and all this S2 BS. I want to see CJ Stroud firmly stick that in a coffin forever in week 1. I want to see him blow up.
To be clear, the correct answer is both, because I'm really excited to see both of these guys. And I'm glad you guys each picked one and were able to make the case. If I had to pick one, I would kind of lean Stroud, just because like what we saw was so historic, just from a real life perspective, that I'm just like super curious to see. Like, what I'm curious to see with Stroud is, was he so good because he's just preternaturally mature and he just started from a high point, but maybe doesn't rise that much higher beyond that? He just started off way higher than usual? Or is that starting point then going to take a leap into, just another echelon and basically challenge Mahomes for being the best quarterback in football? Like, I'm really curious to see how that plays out for him. But
can I just add something about Stroud real quick?
Yeah.
Like how he started last year with like 4 of his starting 5 offensive linemen hurt. Like, I thought he was going to get destroyed in his first couple of games, and that he actually navigated it pretty well was like really an eye opener. And now, like, he's starting not only with his offensive line healthy, but like all these weapons at wide receiver. Like, it's going to be really fun to watch out of the gate.
100%. I could not agree more. Let's go to game 7, Jags at Dolphins. My question here, will Achane step right back into being the most efficient per touch fantasy running back in history? And kind of along those lines, will Raheem Mostert continue to be the preferred goal line option for Miami as he was for a lot of last year? Debra, what do you think?
I don't know if he's going to replicate that type of efficiency, because I do think he gets a bump in workload, but I don't think his efficiency is going to be far off. I still think he's going to be knocking on the door of top 5 or top 10 in basically every tackle breaking metric that you look at. And I think he could start week 1, man. I mean, I wrote this up in the primer, and it was really very telling to me when we look at usage and we look at matchups and really getting into the weeds of it. This matchup specifically, I think we see Achane take the lead on this matchup, because if you look at the splits for the Jacksonville run defense last year, defending zone and gap runs, it was like night and day for them. And why does this matter? Mostert, last year, 64% of his runs were on zone runs. Achane, it was split down the middle. You had almost 50-50 gap and zone. But you look at this defensive matchup, you're talking about a Jacksonville Jaguars run defense that versus zone run. So again, a lot of Mostert's bread and butter. They were top 5 in terms of lowest success rate allowed and yards per carry on zone runs. You flip that over and you look at what they did versus gap runs. They allowed the 12th most gap rushing yards last year and the 6th highest yards per carry to that run type. So we could see a much heavier workload for Davante Adams considering the matchup this week. So I think he takes the lead, and I think it's in week 1.
Fitz, you've been all aboard the Davante Adams train this entire offseason. What do you think this backfield is going to look like here in week 1?
Yeah, I mean, it's still going to be a split. Mostert's still going to be heavily involved. I don't know if he's going to score 21 touchdowns again, but 8 or 9 is a reasonable expectation, reasonable minimum, maybe if he stays healthy all season. And, realistically, I can't expect Davante Adams to average 7.8 yards per carry. It might only be 7.4, 6.8 this year. No, but I'm obviously really high on Achane. Like, he's a top 10 fantasy running back for me. I mean, like the speed and contact balance, he is always reminded me of Warwick Dunn. And like Warwick Dunn was a really good running back in the NFL for a really long time, but he did need a tag team partner. Was Thunder and Lightning with Warwick Dunn and Mike Allstott for a long time. And, so like this is a guy who can do a lot of damage on 12 to 15 touches a game. And we're going to continue to see him wreak havoc with sort of a lighter workload. He's never going to be that Bijan Robinson, Christian McCaffrey type of workhorse, but like he can do plenty of damage on a slightly lesser workload.
Man, do I love watching football live. There's nothing in the world quite like walking into the stadium after an awesome tailgate in that crisp, refreshing fall weather. I haven't been able to make it out to a Broncos game since moving to Denver, but I plan to change that this year. And when I do, I'll be getting those tickets from Game Time. They've got a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. It filters out the fluffs to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't waste any time searching through hundreds or even thousands of tickets. The curations make it easier to save more on not just sports, but concerts, comedy, theater, and more. 2 other features that I love for how much they take the frustration out of ticket buying are Game Time's seat views, showing your view from the seat before you buy, and all-in pricing, so I know the total upfront with no hidden fees. Game Time is simple to use, but more importantly, the app gives me all the information I need to make an easy ticket purchase. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code FANTASYPROS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code FANTASYPROS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. All right, let's go to Panthers at Saints. One of the few games on the slate that is not that intriguing. I would go so far as to call this an uninspiring matchup here. Sorry, D-Bro. We'll start with you, D-Bro.
What it is, man.
Which team's offseason coaching changes will benefit their players in fantasy specifically more? Clint Kubiak in New Orleans or Dave Canales in Carolina?
Oh, this is a really good question. You can make a really good case for both of them. I'm going to say Dave Canales, and I have to go that direction, I feel like, because what we saw out of Bryce Young last year, I mean, he honestly, for most of the season, looked like a player that we were struggling, like, does he belong in the NFL? Like, should he be a starting quarterback? Like, where is the guy that went so high in the NFL draft, and how did that disappear so quickly? So I think looking at what Canellis can provide for Bryce Young, and I'm not telling you that there's this monster blow-up season coming for Bryce Young, but can he, I mean, I know he's only 1 year into his career, and it's a really heavy thing to say, can he resurrect his career? But after that type of rookie season, the narrative swirling around him, you get a shorter leash year after year after year, and this is not the coaching staff that drafted you. So what affiliations to Bryce Young? But like, I think that he can take a step forward, and Dave Canellis has to be the guy that can get that out of him. So really looking at which one can benefit the most. I mean, Bryce Young, like, is my answer easily for this.
Fitz, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with Debra on this one. Dave Canellis, he resuscitated Baker Mayfield last year as the Buccaneers offensive coordinator. He coaxed a 40 touchdown season out of Russell Wilson in 2020 as the Seahawks quarterbacks coach. If Canellis can sort of reanimate Bryce Young after a colossally disappointing rookie season, there are going to be a lot of residual fantasy benefits to other players on the Panthers. Certainly good for Deontay Johnson. Maybe Adam Thielen clings to fantasy relevance for one more year. And I think it would certainly be good for the running backs, Chuba Hubbard and eventually Jonathan Brooks. So, yeah, and like we saw really faint but distinctive sparks last year with Bryce Young, notably on Christmas Eve day where he lit up my Green Bay Packers and forced Jordan Love to keep the pedal to the metal all game just to like put away Carolina in that game, in a game the Packers really needed for playoff position. So like Bryce Young looked great in that game. And if Canellis can get him to do that a little more consistently, the Panthers offense could be pretty intriguing this year.
Last game in the early slate, Vikings at Giants. Can Kevin O'Connell and these weapons make Sam Darnold a playable fantasy quarterback? Fitz, what do you expect?
I think maybe you can. Look at the play callers Sam Darnold has been saddled with over his career, or at least his career as a starter. Jeremy Bates, Adam Gase, Matt Rule. This is going to be by far the best situation Sam Darnold has ever been in as a starting quarterback. I think it's possible his career has a satisfying second act and that he can at least be a streamable fantasy quarterback in 2024.
I tend to agree. And Debro, based on the way you've been tweeting the last couple of days, I think you agree too.
Yeah, I do agree, man. I mean, just look at what Kevin O'Connell did last year for Nick Mullins and Joshua Dobbs. I mean, in the 8 games we got with 2 of these guys playing at least 70% of the snaps, they finished as the QB 11 or higher in weekly scoring 63% of the time. It doesn't sound like a lot, but if you look at the overall season last year, that'd have been the 6th highest QB1 scoring rate in fantasy. So I think really, and we always talk about this, but scheme and coaching freaking matters, especially for quarterbacks. Like, how difficult or hard are you going to make it on your quarterback? How many ways can you give them outs to solve problems that defenses are going to present? So I don't think it's really saying a lot in a huge stretch that if you talk about Sam Darnold, Joshua Dobbs, and Nick Mullins, you put them all in the same room, who is the quarterback that has the most raw talent out of all 3 of them? I think a lot of us, most of us, all of us would say, okay, it's Sam Darnold. So expecting him to play up in this offense, and I get a lot of the weapons are hurt, and this is not the same offense and stuff like that. You still got freaking Justin Jefferson. You still got Aaron Jones, and you still have Kevin O'Connell. So yeah, I think Sam Darnold, we're going to get a lot of streaming weeks out of him.
Let's go to the late slate here, and we'll start with Raiders at Chargers. And it was one of the key questions that we talked about really all summer was, what was this backfield going to look like for Los Angeles? And that's, to me, the question of week 1 is there a running back that emerges for the Chargers as sort of the guy that we want to be playing in fantasy moving forward? The guy where you're kind of taking a victory lap if he was the one you drafted late, the guy where if you're in a shallower league, you're rushing to waivers to pick him up. Will there be kind of the one in this backfield after week 1? Fitz?
Early on, maybe Gus Edwards might be the guy we feel comfortable playing as an RB2 or a flex, but I do tend to think this backfield is going to shapeshift and maybe a couple of times as the season goes on with, maybe J.K. Dobbins can prove himself to be a medical marvel and overcome a major knee injury and a torn Achilles and become a fantasy darling. And maybe my guy, Kamani Vidal, the all-time leading rusher for Troy University, can take over the backfield at some point. But I don't know. Maybe it's just an ensemble cast all season, and we have all these guys giving us like RB3 or RB4 value, and it's kind of tricky to discern week to week. It's certainly one of the more intriguing backfields in the league from a fantasy perspective, made all the more intriguing because we know that Chargers head coach Jim Harbaugh and offensive coordinator Greg Roman want to run the heck out of the ball. Those two love the running game the way I love an ice cold IPA, D-bro.
Sorry. I have this. You can take that for what you will. That's a reaction to either IPAs or a Greg Roman offense. Take it how you will, Fitzy.
Diva, are you sticking with your guy Vidal?
Oh, you better believe, man. Come on. I think that.
Do you think he emerges in week one? I know you believe in him long term. Do you think he emerges in week one?
No. I think that what we're going to see, and I could be wrong, but we're all speculating on this backfield because we just don't freaking know, man. Like, two of the three guys we're talking about in this conversation, we didn't see even play in the freaking preseason. So trying to parse through what this looks like, it can go a bunch of different ways. Gus could lead the way week one. It could be J.K. Dobbins. I think those are the two favorites. But the way that I see this backfield playing out is I don't think that we're going to get a clear guy leading the way in week one. Maybe not even week 2, week 3, week 4. I think this backfield could get split up not only in just 2 ways, but maybe 3. You could see 3 guys getting action in this backfield where it's like, okay, all 3 of them get 8 to 12 touches per game, 8 to 10 touches per game, as run heavy as this offense is going to be. And maybe the coaching staff says, okay, we're just going to let the cream rise to the top. The best guy that's playing, we're going to go with the hot hand. And if you prove week after week that you continue to have the hot hand, then the backfield kind of shifts. And I think if that happens and that's the way it plays out, Kamani Vidal will be the guy at the end of the season when we flip over the cards that was the most productive running back on this depth chart. And we all should have never gotten off of it because I think we had the right take from the very beginning. But then camp talk, him being injured, not seeing him much in the preseason, which is going to delay his ascension in the backfield because he has to make up time with pass protection, showing out to the coaches just in general. I think when it's all said and done, Vidal is going to be the guy that leads this team down the stretch.
Let's go to game 11, Broncos at Seahawks. This is a really intriguing one for me just because there's a lot of players in this matchup that I'm really curious to see what they look like this season. There's a lot of really interesting sleeper options. So I want to ask about those guys. Which draft season sleeper playing in this game will have the best week one between Javonte Williams, Jaleel McLaughlin, and Jaxon Smith-Njigba? D-bro?
I think the best stat line out of all 3 of these guys will go to JSN. Tyler Lockett is banged up right now. DK Metcalf could catch a shadow from Patrick Surtain. I'm not saying it's definitive, but it can happen. He did shadow, I think it was like 5 or 6 times that I wrote up in the primer last year, and he was really, really good at it. So if that happens and that comes to fruition, then you're going to see JSN featured prominently in this game. So I'll say the biggest stat line from this game is JSN, but I think the biggest surprise stat line based off of where he's ranked versus consensus is going to be Jaleel McLaughlin. You look at this matchup, it is a fantastic on paper matchup for both of those running backs. Seattle was a bottom 5 run defense last year. They didn't really do anything in the offseason to improve that run defense where I think it's going to be that much better. Like maybe they're not bottom 3, bottom 5 this year. Maybe they're bottom 10. But still, a really good matchup. And the reason I want to highlight it for Jaleel is we know that if he pays off this year in fantasy, which I think he does, been talking about that for months, it's going to be through the passing game. You look at that matchup specifically for Jaleel in the passing game, we're talking about a defense that has been historically bad versus receiving backs over multiple seasons. And even transplanting Mike McDonald's scheme, Baltimore gave up receptions to running backs last year. Seattle gave up the 10th highest yards per reception and the 9th most receiving yards to running backs last year. I think Jaleel McLaughlin is going to be an extremely strong flex play. I won't be surprised if he walks out of week 1 with RB2 production. So versus consensus, Jalil's the guy that's going to have the surprising stat line, but the guy with the biggest numbers out of this game will be JSN.
Fitz, you highlighted Javonte on yesterday's show. Is he going to be your choice here too?
He is going to be my choice, although I like Jalil too, and I've already bet the over on the receiving yardage for both Javonte and Jalil. Like, that was an easy smash, and they're both like under 20. I mean, Jalil's at like 12 and a half or something like that, ridiculously low. So we know that they're going to be used a lot in the passing game, as running backs always are in a Sean Payton offense. But like, what I found interesting last year was that after using Javonte really lightly early in the season, coming off his 2022 knee injury, his usage really ramped up starting in about week 7. From week 7 to week 16, a 10-game stretch, Javonte averaged 18.9 touches a game, 16 carries, 2.9 catches. Like, that's almost workhorse duty. And I do think Jalil is going to have a complementary role without question. But if Javonte gets that same sort of usage and can go back to being the same powerful, explosive runner he was pre-knee injury, like, he could be a top 10 fantasy back.
Let's go to Cowboys at Browns here. Key question: will the Browns defense shut down opposing fantasy players again this season? And will we see that in week 1, Fitz?
Yeah, this is going to be a defense I think we are going to be depressed about seeing our players go against. It might be one of those skull and crossbones matchups where you're just like, oh no, my guys are playing the Cleveland Browns. They were number 2 in defensive DVOA last year, 2 against the pass, 4 against the run. Myles Garrett is going to raise all sorts of hell off the edge, as he always does, and they have this good and deep collection of cornerbacks. So yeah, I think this is poised to be one of the top defenses yet again.
D-Bro, is this a defense that you think will rise to the level of we avoid them with certain borderline players, or just one where you still play, you're not worrying too much about the matchup, but it's, you're more pessimistic about the outcome?
I think if you're looking at wide receiver 2s and 3s and tight ends versus this defense, I want to have no part of it. I will drop guys in ranks when they face this. I mean, this outside cornerback duo is just fantastic. But I think you're still going to be starting your high-end studs versus them, because a lot of what you're also banking on is just volume. So, like, I'm not getting too cute and worry about CeeDee Lamb this week. I do want to highlight, and Fitzy brought it up, like with the run defense specifically, if you pull up the hood and look under it a little bit more too, there are some concerning metrics for that run defense. So I think we're still going to get really good games out of the running backs, because we're talking about a run defense for Cleveland, as good as their pass defense was, and they were good at limiting touchdowns to running backs. This run defense still did allow the highest explosive run rate last year, the most missed tackles per attempt, and the second highest yards after contact per attempt. So if you're looking for a way of how do teams attack this defense on paper right now, it should be to run the dang ball. So I'm not as concerned with running backs facing this defense as I am with receiving options, because every part of that pass defense is just ridiculously nasty.
I've got a second question in this game. Will one of the Cowboys running backs emerge as the clear starter? It seems from kind of the talk that maybe it ends up being Zeke. Obviously, we've been big fans of Rico Dowdle throughout August. Will one of them emerge in this game against a tough defense, D-Bro?
I think it's Rico Dowdle. I'm not going to be surprised. And because the thing about it is none of us know. Again, we talked about the Chargers backfield. None of us know how this, we've all speculated. And a lot of this has all been narrative based, where it's like, we all expect Ezekiel Elliott to come in and blah, blah, blah. Dude, the other part about this is Rico Dowdle is a favorite of Mike McCarthy. Like, he loves Rico Dowdle, has talked him up the entire offseason. Go check my timeline. Go check Coach Speak Index. He's talked about Rico Dowdle being really good as a pass protector and a 3-down complete running back. I honestly won't be surprised if after we're walking out of week 1, if Rico Dowdle leads the backfield in touches, he gets 15 touches in week 1. You don't see any Dalvin Cook, hardly any, maybe a touch or two late in the game. And we see Rico Dowdle leading the backfield, and we all kind of collectively scratch our heads, and everybody's like, oh man, but what about Zeke? I was told Zeke was going to be such a big part of this backfield all offseason. We're all speculating. So really, I think Rico could step forward this week.
Fitz, what do you expect from the backfield here?
So when you posed this question, Worm, you asked who I expect to be the starter. And I know there's a lot of enthusiasm for Rico Suave, but I think Zeke is going to continue to start, even if it's maybe in an honorary capacity. And I do think it's going to be a split backfield. Maybe McCarthy does really like Dowdle, but Zeke has built up a lot of goodwill with this franchise. So I think he's going to continue to play a role unless he is completely washed. But actually he looked pretty good last year, at least as a pass catcher for the Patriots. And, we have to judge his season against the overall sewage of the Patriots offense last season. So we'll see what it looks like this year, but maybe Zeke isn't completely washed. I think it's probably going to be both of these guys and something close to a 50-50 workload split.
Last game on the late slate, Commanders at Buccaneers. Key question, will our favorite Commanders sleepers, Terry McLaurin, Jaden Daniels, and Bijan Robinson Jr. pay off for fantasy managers right away in week one? Debra, I'll let you go first because you have been all over this offense this season.
I got to talk about the poster boy for the week one primer, right? And shout out to Ethan, our amazing graphics guy, for just speaking to my heart and putting him as the cover guy for this week one primer. Yeah, I think two of these three options have fantastic games, and I think it's Jaden Daniels and Terry McLaurin. I think it's uphill sledding for Bijan Robinson Jr. I think he's going to still think he's going to have a very, very good season. But you really look at the teeth of this defense still is the run defense for the Bucs. They allowed the fifth fewest rushing yards per game, fifth lowest missed tackles per attempt. So I think this is going to lead to the Washington Commanders pace up, passing all over the freaking field. And I think as long as Jaden Daniels can deal with the blitz packages that Bowles is going to throw at him, secondary is not something I'm concerned about. I think Jaden Daniels and Terry McLaurin come out and light it up in week one.
Fitz, do you think we see these sleepers all from the Commanders highlight, week one as some of the best players?
I think Debro nailed this. I'm ranking Jaden Daniels and Terry McLaurin for week one, approximately where I rank them in my draft rankings. And I was bullish on these guys. I had Jaden Daniels as a low-end QB1, Terry McLaurin as a low-end wide receiver 2 or high-end wide receiver 3. But I think you do have to dock Bijan Robinson a little because of the tough matchup. Todd Bowles' defenses always do a really good job against the run. So he's more of a mid-range RB3 for me this week, but I think most weeks he's got low-end running back 2 appeal. So yeah, the matchup pushes Robinson into borderline start-sit territory, but start McLaurin, start Daniels.
Getting a little bit deeper here, one of Zach Ertz or Luke McCaffrey is catching a touchdown this week. Calling it right now.
Really? Nice.
Interesting call. Let's go to Sunday Night Football. Awesome game, another playoff rematch, Rams at Lions. What does the Rams offense look like with everyone healthy? Because we didn't see it a whole lot last year, and what we saw was pretty exciting. They, of course, added Blake Corum to the mix as well. So what do you think this offense looks like when everything's humming and they're kind of running at full strength, Fitz?
A lot of Puka and a lot of Cooper Kupp, maybe in equal measure. I think the backfield is going to be mostly Kyren, at least to start off, with some Blake Corum mixed in. Change of pace stuff, maybe a dash of Colby Parkinson at tight end. So nothing too out of the ordinary.
Debra?
I think it's going to be a lot of Puka and Kupp like Fitz talked about. Again, Kyron's still going to lead the backfield. I think specifically for this matchup in week one, though, I think that Cooper Kupp is going to lead the way. This is, arguably probably the healthiest we see him all year, and I'm not projecting injuries and stuff, but even if you just look at from the coverage matchup, when Puka and Kupp were both on the field last year and healthy and stuff, we're talking about a wide receiver room that I think the reason I think it's going to be led by Kupp this week is because you're looking at Detroit specifically. 54% single high last year. That was in Kupp's wheelhouse. And Puka was still really, really good versus that coverage type, but Kupp led the way with a 27% target share and a 33% first read share. So while I still will stand on, I think Puka out targets Kupp this year, I think in week one, it's going to be Kupp over Puka.
I could pretty much make that a question every week for the Rams, as long as they're both healthy, is who's the guy this week, Puka or Kupp. So we'll see if that continues to come up throughout the season. Let's go to Monday Night Football, last game on the slate. Jets at 49ers, another fun one. How good will a 40-year-old Aaron Rodgers look coming off the Achilles injury? Will we need to be patient as he shakes off some rust, or will this be what we kind of expected it to look like at the start of last year before the unfortunate injury, D-Bro?
I think you're going to see a rusty Rodgers in this one. And this is not so much just like Rodgers and stuff, but like, I mean, look, parse through all this, guys. Like in the offseason, like whether it's been managed reps and practice, not the entirety of camp and stuff like that, but not playing at all in the preseason. Like you need on field when the bullets are flying kind of reps. I think Rodgers is going to struggle a little bit, not specifically just like, the early part of the season, but this is also a really, really good defense for the San Francisco 49ers. So I think that the Jets should wisely ease him in, like really lean on Breece in this game and their defense, not put a ton on Rodgers to carry the entire offense because he's probably going to have to do that the entire year. But I think you're seeing him knocking off some rust for a player that didn't play at all last year and none in the preseason. So first snaps in a game since 2022.
Fitz, where are your expectations for Rodgers?
D-Bro just mentioned 2022 when Aaron Rodgers posted the lowest passer rating in his 15 years as Green Bay's starter. So he was not like vintage Aaron Rodgers when we last saw him, and that was 2 years ago pre-Achilles injury. So Rodgers still has a really powerful arm, and you see it in the camp highlights, and terrific accuracy. Mm-hmm. Still one of the best throwers of the football of all time, and he still has that. But he's not going to run anymore. The Jets offense is going to move at a slow pace. The Jets defense is lights out, so they're probably not going to be involved in many shootouts. Like Rodgers, if he stays healthy, I think he can be the quarterback who sort of takes this team where they were hoping to go last year. But for fantasy, he's just not a guy I'm interested in at all. I think he's certainly a better real life quarterback than fantasy quarterback at this point.
We'll get out of here on that. Thank you, everybody, for tuning into this week's episode. I hope you continue to tune in every Friday throughout the season. Man, I'm just so excited that football is back. I cannot wait for Sunday to just hear Scott Hansen again and sit there on the couch and watch a whole lot of football. It's going to be absolutely glorious. For D-Bro and Fitz, I'm Ryan Wormeli. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll see you again next Friday.